think in the minds of us who are touch therapists or have a license to touch is to always, in particular when you're dealing with persistent pain conditions and chronic pain, is trauma is always there. It's never not there. It's 100% there in some capacity.
When somebody is talking to you about pain in their life, even those cases where you may think their pain is performative or exaggerated, it's best not to try to yank the conversation back to your frame.
These talks are always fascinating because you never quite know what you're going to get.
I don't know if it helped or not, but it was like swollen and I wasn't sure what else to do with it. So
660 all the way up to 880.
My screws removed.
It was a trip, literally.
I love your goggles, Kristen.
Oh,
That looks so spacey.
Harry, your hair looks so different. It looks all like curly or something.
Well, how's everybody?
Good.
There's a head going this way, and then there's just kind of this face of just
Uh,
this man on my face. Well, we'll dive into that, huh?
Yeah, there's the answer good, and then there's the I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly the facade.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive with my esteemed colleagues, friends, brother and sister, Kristen Lindstrom and Terry Kim. Just a brief introduction for those of you who don't know us. We all used to work together for Kaiser Permanente as physical therapists. Kristen is still with the organization, and Terry and I have moved on to other endeavors, but we still stay connected with each other, and part of our project is to share our collective knowledge and experience, both in the clinic and out of the clinic, and also to bring in a perspective of trauma-based work. And today we'd like to focus on the idea of difficult conversations with our patients, our clients, especially with clients that have, so to speak, they've healed on paper, but they're still struggling with the idea of recovery and how to navigate guiding that patient, that client through those waters. And Kristen will be sharing a little bit about her experience with one of her patients that has physically recovered, as all the providers have checked off the list, but is still struggling with trying to get back to a place where he feels comfortable, and just how Kristen would navigate using verbiage and the power of words and the power of perspective, and how we can help guide our patients and clients through that. And we just wanted to share our perspective on that and our thoughts to you guys.
So I kind of was reflecting back on this chapter about hard conversations. I'm just going to start midway here. I mean, the general theme is hard conversations, but so there's a temptation to try to yank the conversation back to your frame. Here's how the situation looks to me. Here's what I'm doing to alleviate the problem. Here are all the other problems I have you might not be aware of. There's a temptation, in other words, to revert to the frames you feel comfortable with. It's best to avoid this temptation. As soon as somebody starts talking about times when they felt excluded, betrayed, or wronged, stop and listen. When somebody is talking to you about pain in their life, even those cases where you may think their pain is performative or exaggerated, it's best not to try to yank the conversation back to your frame. The first job is to stay within the other person's standpoint to more fully understand how the world looks to them. Your next job is to encourage them to go into more depth about what they have just said. I want to understand your point of view as much as possible. What am I missing here? Curiosity is the ability to explore something even in stressful and difficult circumstances. I think that kind of resonated with me. And Ed, you'd mentioned kind of circling back to that, the patient that I was having a challenging time, and then I wasn't kind of sure what to say or have the right answer for. And I think at that last visit, it was kind of, again, more, it was just listening, like, again, feeling like, okay, I don't have to have the answer and I don't have the cure. And this is his experience, and I can be here to support and listen to his experience, but I don't need to take on the emotion or the frustration. But yeah, just need to be there. So we really just kind of let him talk and tried to actually really understand what his fears were, kind of reverted to like, what does it feel like in your body right now as you say that? Because I think what he came to the realization is that he's like, I realize I need to kind of shift my mindset, because the reality is that I want this to be back to 100%. And, I'm seeing that I need to accept that that's not likely the reality of it. And I need to shift my perspective on the things that I can achieve right now and kind of focus on those things. So that was great, actually, without too much guidance. Like, it was kind of perfect after having that conversation to push forward and be hopeful of the things, again, that he can do. He was super active before, and again, it hasn't even been a year yet. So I also said, there's always room for improvement here. It's going to continue to improve. And the other thing we talked about, because he was injured on his bike with how he fell, and one of his goals was to get back to bike riding, and he just hasn't been able to do it. He just said he's too afraid to get on the bike. And so we talked about what he might be able to do, like even just being near the bike, or like what would it feel like? Can you be curious, just getting on the bike and just holding the handlebars and just having it be that. You don't have to go any further.
The reading by Brooks that you read is powerful.
Very powerful.
And it goes along again, I think, with the other authors that we do kind of imbibe. And I like that there's this repetition from different voices. And it really reaffirms the work that we do together, have done together in Gestalt practice, and all the work we've done at Esalen. And it just continues to grow. And so what I remember from a previous conversation is that, you came to the table with a bit of a struggle. And what I hear today is no struggle. What I hear is like, there's this, oh, I got this. And you want to say more about that, Kristen, just about your own coming into the time that you had with him and this experience, and how you were feeling maybe during and afterwards, like post?
Yeah, I mean, I think often, his recovery has been slow, complicated with some prior nerve issues and exacerbation of that with the forearm fracture, and also a history of some mental health, depression and whatnot. So kind of all of that was even beforehand. So it's always been the energy in the encounter has always been pretty low on the patient's end. And so I'm, again, trying to be the cheerleader, the uplifter, trying to like radiate that energy onto him, which sometimes I feel like it took a little bit of that, but but mostly it ended up more just draining me. I kind of wasn't separating myself from that energy and would kind of feel deflated, even at the, with there's significant progress that, that has been made. But I think for me, I was always thinking of the end game of like what he used to be able to do and what his goals were. Rock climbing and doing these very physically intensive activities. And so it was like I looked at when I set my goals, and it's like, whoa, there's, we're definitely not achieving those goals within that time frame. And so it's almost like I felt this like, what can I do to speed up the process, the healing? Yeah, kind of more of my journey, my journey of like being being the healer. And so, each time he would come in and it was like, well, still, with kind of that energy, still pain, I can need to do this. And I just kind of immediately would kind of go into this, like, okay, what are we going to do now? Okay, how can I boost up that energy and try to be positive and maybe kind of even pushing in the wrong way, and really try to show you can do this, you can do this. And then he'd be really sore afterwards. And okay, let's take a step back from the objective findings and okay, we need to keep measuring the strength, and like, let's go back to this person and what is he experiencing, and, whole person experiencing, not just like this one part of him. And I think, yeah, really kind of getting to the bottom of what was driving his fear and thus his pain experience. Kind of mini conversation on pain neuroscience and how, that cycle of kind of fear and catastrophization and just kind of, I've had that visual hanging in my office for quite some time, and kind of trying to, give some basic information on how that kind of continuous cycle can affect healing and affect symptoms. And so I think that's what we've really kind of been focusing on more, is like less of the actual physical work, because he's pretty body in tune, and I think he knows kind of what he can handle at this point, and how to kind of pace himself, but kind of understanding how his mental thoughts and negative feelings about it were kind of affecting his recovery. So I think kind of planting that seed, and then it took some time, I think, for him to really integrate that and again come to that acceptance and realize, like, okay, I need to shift the mindset a little bit and kind of try to move forward on this path of not having so much fear dictating his recovery and his pain, but yeah, realizing some acceptance and what he can do, and the things that he can focus on that he enjoys, activity wise, that maybe weren't exactly the same as what he was doing before, but maybe are stepping stones to getting back there, even though he hasn't reached his end goal. So that I think because I really used to leave his treatments, I think, just again kind of just deflated, like, what did I really do to help, or what am I not seeing, what am I not doing that's influencing his slow progress or lack of progress. I really put it on myself, and so shifting my mindset has helped me, because then I take that into the next patient sometimes, where I'm just like, again, my self-confidence, am I missing something here? What could I be doing better to help the recovery? And so yeah, taking a step back and again realizing that this is his journey, and again being curious and asking the questions, and trying to figure out what he needs or would be helpful for him, but not taking on that it's my responsibility, I guess. Or again, in the acceptance for both of us that, like, okay, well, this may be, you've gotten 80-90% of your motion, and that may be kind of where it stays for a while. There's still opportunity to get better. Your body's always kind of orienting towards healing if you're giving it the right environment. So yeah, I think having that conversation has kind of helped. And I don't have that expectation for myself. And I don't think he has that much expectation for me either. I'm just, again, more alongside, kind of as a coach guiding him, but I'm not like the one that's gonna fix his problems. Ooh.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah, a lot of words came out of there. I was doing a lot of writing here because I think this is emblematic of the shift between the struggle of patient care and that one patient that can create, a lot of difficulty for the rest of our week.
Mhm.
And this is really the antidote to that. What you just described, Kristen, very, very well was, and you put out some really good words, adjectives, that we talk about with regards to pain neurosciences and, when physiologically the tissue's healed, because it goes through its, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever. It just depends on what the tissue is. But the emotional mindset of the individual and the relationship, their historical relationship subjectively to pain and suffering. And from that pain and suffering, the way that they attach to the struggle of not being able to do the things that they wish they could do and used to do. And one of the things I was thinking as you were talking about, because you mentioned, the mindset and then getting over the fear of, and then I wrote down, the experience of pain, and then I put question mark trauma.
Mm.
And I think in the minds of us who are touch therapists or have a license to touch is to always, in particular when you're dealing with persistent pain conditions and chronic pain, is trauma is always there. It's never not there. It's 100% there in some capacity. For some of our patients and clients, it's the overarching theme of their life. And then for others, there's maybe forms of where they're able to understand and metabolize and move through life in their own way. And one of the things I was thinking about, the question I had for you as you were speaking was, this is more of a more metaphysical, existential, maybe quantum for you in the healing expression is, do you think you being his therapist, that there was something that he was offering to you as an elixir for yourself in the struggle that you were having initially or was with him up until just recently? Like, what was he offering to you is, I guess, the better way of putting it.
Well, I think he was offering again for myself to step back and take a look at how I engage with people and how I deal with difficult conversations or things that aren't meeting the expectations that I have of myself or others. And so, and let's see. I think also it's working with him has made me again more aware of shifting from where I kind of get in, again, I come into my visit with like, oh, what we're going to work on and what I'm expecting them to show up, how I'm expecting someone to show up. Again, I'm thinking like, oh, you did your home program and you're going to be this much better now. And so it kind of, again, helped me take the step back and again, like no expectations, shifting from the, wanting to get the objective improvements and just focusing on the person and listening to what their needs are.
So another layer of that would be when you're feeling something where you struggle a bit with when you walk out after the session and you carry it through your day and you're questioning your capacity, one as a human being, but also professionally first. And is there, this might be a little bit more personal, but is there a point in your life that you recognize that within you that's not related to physical therapy, that somehow shows itself up in the moment of the session itself with a patient? The feeling of not being enough, or like questioning your capacity, your knowledge base, how you show up.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I've talked to you about this even like a few years ago, where I kind of go through these phases of, feeling like, oh, I know everything. And like, I'm not know everything, but basically I'm in a flow. I'm in a flow where it's like, I have this knowledge, and sometimes I'm like talking to my patients and explaining things, and I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even know how that came out of my mouth. But that sounded, I know what I'm talking about. And I notice this kind of flow where it's like the energy and the people are getting like, I'm seeing improvement. And then I kind of go through these dips of, I think I remember talking to you, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, where I was just like, oh, wow, I'm in this phase where I'm just questioning myself with everything. And it's almost like the imposter syndrome, where I just like, wait, do I know? Do I know anything? Like, I learned so much stuff, and what do I really know? And so I'm not actually, it's interesting because it's kind of come and gone over the years. And it seems like it's kind of related to, my internal like struggle or state of mental health, confidence that kind of vacillates. And I don't know if that's something that's shifted. I've noticed it more in my midlife. Like I think about when I was a new grad, or even my first few years, sometimes I felt way more confident then than I do now.
Because you didn't know any better, right?
Right. I didn't. I think sometimes I think that's part of it. It's like now it's like I've learned so many of these different things, and it's just like, where do I start? What's again, like in my 7 personalities, I want the best. So I wanted to make sure I'm picking the best thing instead of just being okay with like, okay, let's try this or try this. If I try something and it doesn't work, then oh, they're not really getting that. Then I just get like, oh, am I not teaching it right? Am I not, I start to get like down on myself there. But yeah, so again, it's almost like some shift in my brain. Like the more experience that I have, the more I start like questioning what I'm doing.
Did you ever struggle in school? Was it hard? Where you ever felt like you were a failure?
Not particularly. I mean, I think writing was something I always I struggled with, and I just didn't, I think that was probably my most challenging thing, was when I had to like write a paper or, do research and kind of bring things, together into a meaningful, logical work. So that was, I would say that was definitely a struggle. It was the biggest struggle for me was speed reading. I got a very bad grade in that. When you had to like read on the thing and then comprehend like that, it was.
You didn't take the Evelyn Woodhead's speed reading class, did you?
I don't know.
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
that was a struggle, but I would say for the most part, that's not, I didn't struggle too much. You know, I think for me, I can look at something and kind of memorize it if I write things out, in a way that's like visually easy to take in. But the retention, you know, so I think I did well in school because I can study well for the test, but
Mm.
bigger picture, you know, I could the detail stuff, but like bigger picture and connecting things and then remembering it for longer term was more of a challenge for me. But I'm curious about that question. What do you possibly see or relate to what I'm describing as maybe something that in school?
Well, I think our upbringing, depending on what our upbringing is like, and then the peer group that we're around too, because we're heavily influenced by those around us, and our need to succeed, that I look at for myself, and I know that I have very distinct markers in my life where I chose not be as smart. And it's kind of a weird thing to say, but
You chose not to be a
not
smart?
to be as smart.
Oh. Mm.
And this has to do with being Asian. It's
Mm.
just the Asian myth that has been created, which is just a ridiculous story in ways of itself, in my opinion. But I think I mentioned before to you, like I was never good at math,
Mm.
but I pretty much chose not to be good in math.
Mm.
To knock down that notion that, you know, I had all my pens in my pocket and I was going to go be a doctor or a lawyer or something, or a mathematician or something, you know. And that's not so much that came out of my family. It was just more of a kind of the overarching theme of what it meant to be Asian, particularly where I grew up in Silicon Valley. So I became an athlete. And
Mm.
so I was a jock, and I just kind of played the jock mentality. It's like, you know, jocks are stupid. I wasn't stupid though, but I got an average. I
Mm.
don't even know what my GPA was in high school. I think it was like 3.5, 3.4. I don't even know, honestly. I don't remember taking any tests, Kristen. Isn't that
Mm.
weird? So as much as like how you're articulating how you present yourself to the patient and the struggle that you have about, dang it, you know, you get down on yourself and it's hard and the struggle is, I was just kind of wondering, and I don't have an answer to any of this. I was just curious about, was there something in your life where that would happen to you previously, where you walk out of a room and you go, you know, like, I don't even know what I'm doing.
Mm.
And does that somehow filter into the conversation or the opportunity that arises through the challenge, the struggle that you have with your patient in that moment? It's like, does that come from somewhere else?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it comes from.
Nothing that like comes to the forefront. I'd have to kind of think about that. Um, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think with my writing because that's definitely something I put like a mental block on, or just like, oh, I'm not good at that, or it takes me so long to compose something that I'm happy with. It's incredibly time consuming. And I question that all the time, even if I'm like writing a comment to somebody's, you know, and that's why sometimes it's hard for me to just respond because the energy or the thought the energy that it takes to compose something, I'll go in and I'll like write something and delete it and write it and delete it, and then sometimes I'm like, oh, forget it, I'm just not gonna respond to that.
Well, then I have another question for you.
Yeah.
Then, so let's just take that for a second. And Ed, you can chime in here at any point. So with that thought about writing and the difficulty with conjuring up and trying to create something that's, you know, that you feel comfortable with, was there, again, in your time in your life where someone said that you're not a good writer, or somehow indirectly might have mentioned it to you?
um
Do you recall?
Gosh, not that I remember, but
Hmm.
yeah, but I still carry that on, and it's like, oh, I'm just not a good writer. And, I was definitely more focused in the math, science. I thought that was what I was more skilled at. And so I, moved towards those types of courses. And when I think about it, it's like I haven't really written anything or taken any kind of English class, since high school. Even in college, the writing that I took was it was like for medical providers. So it was all like, analyzing research studies. It was very objective, but nothing creative. And so I think I like get that roadblock whenever I'm writing something. I compare myself to others and I see again, someone like you, Terry, where it just like spills out this kind of eloquent writing. And then I was like, okay, I have like one sentence to respond. I get in my head about that, but I don't have any recollection of like a teacher or like parents or yeah, maybe it was my speed reading where I was just like, I can't comprehend this.
Could
Um,
be.
I think I got a D in speed reading, which was
That could be an inflection point. Because A, B, C, D. Who wants the D?
yeah. Well,
None
I
of
mean,
us.
that wasn't like my grade. That was like mixed in with, the other stuff in the English class, but
Sure,
it was definitely something, well, I'm just
sure,
not good at this. And
sure.
uh, yeah, so, and same thing, and then on my SAT and my I would always the verb
Oh,
scores were quite low, but I scored high on analytical and math. And so, it's interesting because I see that somewhat with Jackson. So I say, oh yeah, I was just never good at like English and writing. Maybe that's how you are because you're like this. But then okay, I gotta stop that because
mm-hmm.
you know
Very good.
on his own journey. But that I think I just automatically, um, yeah, think when I go to write something, even if it's like a birthday card or something, it's like, okay, this is like an uphill
Mm.
struggle and maybe it's more in kind of like just expressing my emotions, and maybe that again goes back to you know
Well, I would consider all of us artists because we are doing art, right, in our own way. I remember when you first took your first watercolor, or I think it was that or plein air at Esalen. I remember you
yeah
just off your just like that's cool. And then of course Ed, musically inclined, and then doing your own art as well, and your own cartooning, and just the natural proclivity for allowing yourself to express yourself in those arenas, which is just one domain of your life. And I don't think that we can, in my opinion, there's two things related to the conversation of catastrophizing and living in traumatic experiences. Is essentially what we're talking about here with our patients, because when the chronic pains are not being resolved, it's because there's a unmetabolized traumatic experiencing that's not being realized. And the notion that you began with about letting go, detaching, and just listening and being curious to their story and going deeper with their story without involving any of your judgment or painted story that you think that you believe, uh, allows for individuals to be able to start to hear themselves again and maybe possibly pull back some of the folds of the reasons why they're so stuck. And that's where the power of just listening is so crucial. And part of that in being consistently in the flow, Kristen, consistently in the flow, every day it's a flow, is to acknowledge or to be able to understand, like, where did the origins of me saying no to myself begin? When was it? And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to count up all the points, but you can just note these areas, and they may not be big things. They could be little super small t's, right, in the trauma area, or just feelings of like not being seen, not being heard, not being allowed to express ourselves. And I think that's was the origin of my question to you, was like, what part of you is in him? What part of you identifies with the struggle that he's having, that makes that brings forward the conversation in your head of like, I'm not enough? And that might be a very difficult question and concept to answer, because it's certainly a big one. Um, but I think it's a
Can you just
notion.
repeat it one more time because I Yeah. I was starting to
Uh,
think as you were talking, and then I was like,
Yeah,
what?
so what part of in the conversation in the relationship you're having with this is with anybody, by the way. So this is where if you want to be consistently in your flow state and just you're like a Yoda. This is total Jedi mind trick, guys. This is the thing I was teaching you guys way back when, is
Mhm.
that if what part of the struggle that you're having within you is this individual offering to you? So what part of you are you seeing in this individual as you that they're offering back to you as a mirror? And
Mm.
when you walk out thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 25, 30 years and I'm still screwing up and this person's not getting any better. Why? And it's so easy to just, okay, let's just write the discharge note and move them on, punt them. And this is all I can do. And that's where the wisdom stops. And the depth of it is really the work that we do on our own selves to understand how it is that we're showing up and how we're attached to and why we're attached. Because there's a reflection of the energy and frequency that's being brought forward that we are seeing now. And it's all you're doing is that you're now uncovering an aspect of the light. Really, it's like, for example, you can't see UV, right? You don't see it. We see the colors. It's a very we see a very, very, very narrow range of the frequency. Bees and animals, birds, they see much wider perspective. And so part of this is when you ask the question of yourself, it's you're actually doing this. You're opening it up a little bit more so you can actually see more broadly. And that creates a greater understanding. And then you don't struggle anymore with your patient. You just don't struggle. Or you struggle significantly less, I should say. And with each repetition of when you flow and you go down into a dip and you come back up, it's just those dips get to be much smaller to the point where it's just like a little puddle. And you just walk right over it after an hour, 30 minutes, 10 minutes. And then eventually it doesn't really bother you. But if you're getting emotional around it, is what I'm saying, is if you're feeling like I'm struggling, then that's all about you. So that you talk about the sense of self-worth, of being perfect and doing it well, and certainly wondering. It's not even the wonder. It's like, I know I have the tools, but why is this not happening? And it's about you, not about them. Mm. What do you think, Ed?
I think, well, first of all, Kristen, that was a very beautiful, you brought us to this beautiful progression of how you um, struggled alongside your patient. Like you brought up issues of he was having fear, he was trying to set an expectation of, I need to be 100%. And then and we've all been there too, the patient's always right, the customer is always right. Trying to meet that person. Okay, how do I get this person to 100%? What am I missing? And as, probably more as new grads and even down the line, what am I missing in my checklist? And then the fact that you were able to let go and just take a step back and really probably utilize the tools of the other thing that we're also exploring in this journey is Gestalt and self-inquiry. And you were probably using Gestalt on yourself and just seeing where you were at and saying, well, all I can do is hold space for this person and just be there and really listen and really be in his or her shoes. And it seemed like with that there was a shift. I mean, just even energetically, I felt that shift.
Yeah, me
It
too.
was palpable when you were
Yeah.
telling this story. And then it seemed like he in parallel was also appreciating, well, and shifting his perspective, like, well, I maybe I can't be 100%. And you having, and I was just, as you guys were talking, I was just reviewing some of the Enneagrams from our previous deep dives, and Kristen with the type 7 as the enthusiast, as the peacemaker, and just how at your best you can be receptive. you are thoughtful and you have that capacity to hold space and take in not just a patient, but maybe just in your interpersonal relationships. I know with us, you're always there and present, and I feel held that you're there and you're present and you're being in our shoes. And I always feel, oh, I'm not just talking to a wall. I feel like I'm talking to
Mm,
someone who's holding space for me. And I've always appreciated that.
yeah.
And I think with this journey, it felt almost like as you were struggling to try to be there for this person, you came to a point where you knew the limitations of the situation. I don't want to say limitations, but the you took a step back and looked at the big picture, and just held space for this person. And then he started to realize that maybe he was just picking up on that energy as well and feeling, well, I need to shift my perspective. And maybe in that realization, he will be able to get on his bicycle. He will be able to get on the climbing wall. Um,
Mm.
but that was my thought as I was hearing you describe before on this journey and the struggles that both you and your patient were kind of going through, and probably what we all go through when we are dealing with that difficult conversation with that person that's struggling. Like on paper, you should be okay. Your fracture is healed, but there's still something going on. Like Terry, you're saying there's trauma, there is trauma, and it's hidden, and it can be 50 years ago, and it's still like affecting us,
Mhm.
and and affecting us in some minute way that if we really take the time to pause and
Mhm.
listen to that, both as a patient, client, and as a practitioner, you know, coach, to really help them to to take that leap.
Yeah. It, I feel like really emotional, like in my heart as we're talking about this, and I'm trying to
Mm,
kind of figure. I think it was interesting. Like the injury was kind of similar to mine in terms of like
mm,
you know, complete broke, different area that's similar, and with the hardware in there too. And I think what I feel after like going through that experience is like I know like no, it's not like people come up and ask me like, oh, is it back to normal? Is it 100%? And it's like I want to be positive, and one of them like, no, it's not.
mm,
And I don't know that it ever will be.
mm,
Um, and so sometimes I reflect that, and I think like, yeah, no, I already assume it's not going to be, no, when they first come out, it's like, oh, this is, you've got the hardware in there and the screws, and that's many times there's irritation there. There's like continuous irritation. Um, and so I think sometimes I get that mindset just like with my experience, and again, like trying to be positive. Again, it's much better, things are 90% better, but like getting to that 100%. And you see some people achieve it.
mhm,
It's possible. Um, but I think there also are many people who end up in those situations again um the metal in there is just the dynamic of how it interfaces with the tissues is just different, and that's the reality of it. Um, so I think, yeah, I get that may be why I get more emotional too with like this particular case, and like he knew that I was getting my hardware taken out, and then that's like on the mind too. It's like, is this, and I think I don't know if like for people who haven't had that, like, having this metal like in your body, like it is interesting. I try not to like totally focus on it, but I feel that there's that sensation is there, and
mhm,
it's not, normal. Um,
mhm.
and the reality is
Exactly.
like it may be, again, that's going to continue to be irritating.
I can relate to that with
Yeah.
my ACL and both my shoulders. That particularly with my ACL, I have it's been tender since 1998 on just below, right on my tibial plateau, medial tibial plateau, just below it.
Yeah.
And it's numb.
Yeah.
I don't feel it, but it's sore, but it doesn't affect me, functionally until I re-injured it last January. And now I know, like you, it's like, okay, I can't get in the mode of being a Debbie Downer on this. Every time I feel something that's not right, it doesn't feel like I can normally do something I used to always do without feeling an expression of discomfort. And what I do is I just go back and slow everything way back down again and just put my intention in, this is healing. Even if it's a year and a half out, it's going to be a constant form of healing. And I know that I can continue to do what I need to do. So it's the healing versus the cure, they say.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and healing expression is a long journey. And the cure is something that's it's eradicated completely for a time being. So I think it's,
And
I'm going to agree with you, Ed, that these talks are always fascinating because you never quite know what you're going to get
Mhm.
or where you're going to go and what we're going to lead through. And I want to echo Ed in that, because when you said this, Ed, it was, I felt something. And that was when you said, you're always there to listen. And I thought, how many times was I not listened to? And I would just have to walk away because like I had something I felt I needed to express. And, either people would just walk away from you right in the middle of something that's dear and important to your heart, but they're in their own world and they gotta go, or they're doing paperwork, and what a gift that is to be able to say that, for Ed to say that to you, Kristen, as an acknowledgement that you're actually present. And it's one of the best gifts we can have and offer to the world. And that's how you started this conversation, was I let go and I listened, essentially just listened. You genuinely listened. And that's a huge, huge component of healing. Sometimes probably is the aspect of healing, in my opinion, a lot of times. So let's sit with that for a moment.
I remember one of the workshops given by Kaiser before, especially as a new grad, is thinking, oh gosh, I need to get all this done in a certain amount of time. And the instructor saying, well, give the patient or the client uh, three minutes to just listen. And at that, depending on where you are in your phase of professional life, sometimes it's like, man, 3 minutes, that's a long time. I need to get this done. But really, if you take that time, like Kristen, like we all are striving for, is just to sit and be in that person's shoes and listen, not just again in professional, but in interpersonal, and to really sit. And those times that I really reminded myself, man, just sit and listen and get out of here and just be there. And it really makes a shift.
Oh yeah.
And like I said, Kristen, when you were telling the story, it was palpable, the energetic shift from before and after. And it was beautiful to hear, and I'm even more probably beautiful to witness in your clinical space.
And through that experience, because we all felt it, we're on 3 different states. Okay, so this is the quantum experience and the multiverse, the unlimited potential that he has also felt it himself now.
Yeah.
I have no doubt. I'm 100% in belief. I know that to be true. So the more that we're doing the work, to uncover ourselves and be the beautiful jewels and divine aspects of our being, the the conduit of it goes from a very small size to a much larger gauge. And that's the expression of how we magnetize the world to us. And it's cleansing in a way. You're kind of cleansing your crystals in your body. Go get sun, clean. And by doing that, the radiance of the light and the energy that's brought forth through that experience, through the hard work that you do of discovery, then you will meet in this world that will tune with you. And you cannot look the other way. You just have to have the conversation with the person. There's an engagement that occurs because the energy in this space brings you together. Now, it might just be for that time, and it might be for a month or 2 years, or it might be for the rest of your life, but there's something, some juice in there that's giving us the satisfaction of knowing that what we're doing is we're on the right path. And that's what keeps us going and allows us to be able to piece back elements of ourselves and to find our true nature, or to find our divine self. And that's what I believe is the wise practice of healing, is that you're just a conduit of the healing. You are just a vessel and a vehicle for that element, and you become a deep listener, but also a witness to the unconditional positive regard for the other human being, who's really an alien, but what do I know? Wow.
Wow, you know a lot. And again, it's to be present, and it is beautiful. Thank you, Chris, and also for sharing your own healing journey. And I was before we got on Zoom, I was actually, it's interesting you brought it up because I was thinking a lot about you and your injury, but then you being able to get on the mountain and
I know.
ski, and yes, it's not 100%, and but to be out there and to just test it and put, like we would suggest to our patients and clients, like, hey, there is that choosing an adventure. Okay, do I really baby it? Do I really try to power through it? Do I try to, like, okay, let's see how it is, and I'll do this, I won't do this, and the fact that you're kind of going through this alongside your own patient, I mean, that's
I
and
brought
him.
I brought my snowboard up, but I was like, maybe I'll try it. Take a nap.
Yeah. I mean, kudos for you to get out there. And even just like you said, just hold to your patient, just put your hand on the handlebar, maybe not get on it, but bring that snowboard. And it's like, okay, you have that power to decide what you want to do. And that is empowering.
Exactly. 100%. You have choice.
Yeah.
And the fact that you said, just put your hand on the handlebar, or walk with it, or sit on top of it. I mean, it's like step commands. It's like the thing we learn as therapists is we have to meet them at some point in their capacity to learn, cognitively, right? So sometimes it's just one step, not three at one time, and just build on it fundamentally.
What I'm kind of recognizing too, sometimes I go a few steps ahead. It's like break it down into the most basic. With my self-confidence, like, oh, I need to be doing something like fancy and different and novel, and
I know.
I think that's where I get that in
Glitzy.
Oh, after 25 years, I should have some like magic, like, oh, you just have to do this one move and it will, and that's gonna, that's gonna heal you. And sometimes when I go back on these, I'm like, I'm doing these same exercises after 25 years. They're doing
I know,
but I'm
right?
like, oh, but this has like worked for a long time. Like, why would I need something that's like more difficult or for them to understand? Just like sometimes it's hard for me, just like, okay, you just go start simple,
KISS principle, right?
Like, again, as my 7, I'm kind of like, oh, a little bit of all of this. And then it's like, too overwhelming for them or for myself. It's like, okay.
Well, then I can see how your Enneagram being also the cheerleader, you get really excited and get go, 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 and you've got all this information, and it kind of gets deflated and it doesn't reach the goal that you need, and it really impacts you.
Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah.
I mean, Terry, we've always looked, because you always had a really beautiful way, again, on this journey here of difficult conversations, and I don't want to say difficult patients, clients, but just difficult conversations, difficult situations. And you've really explored the power of the word and the power of the intention, even inflection and just
Mm.
how you're going to be okay,
Mhm.
and sometimes that's priceless. And
Mm.
then Kristen, hearing you say there's always room for improvement. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
like it's very nurturing. It's like you're being realistic. Like both of you I've heard you guys be just realistic because our patients and clients appreciate that, but also giving hope, but in a way that's not fluff.
Real.
It's real. And then I remember in a previous conversation, Terry, you bring up, okay, when we are meeting our patient client and they're coming from the doctor's office and they said, my doctor said that I will never be able to do this. I cannot do this. And I don't want to, I used to just say, oh gosh, we got to do damage control. I mean, I don't want to make it sound so negative, but we do have to change that perspective, right?
Yes. And I always think about, and this is sometimes what I will, again, it depends on the person who's sitting in front of you. You have to determine the kind of vocabulary you're going to use, or the words, or the
Right.
directness, or how to be gentle uh, and enter into the conversation, but with some level of impact that they can walk out with.
Mm.
And sometimes I'll tell my patients, do you believe that your thoughts have anything to do with how your day is going to go? And they say, yeah, of course. And do you believe that your thoughts can make you sick, stressed? You get stressed just by thinking of things. Oh yes, and they would give you examples. They're more than happy to give you examples of all the crazy things that make them stressed out, because that's the loop they're in. And so then I stop them, and I have had to do this many times. I say, okay, so I understand that because I know that's the world that we live in. But do you think that if you have the capacity to make yourself sick, that you actually have the capacity to think yourself healthy and healed? And the majority of them say, in the very beginning, right off the bat, unconsciously, what do? No. Almost all of them at the very beginning, you can see them going, no, it's not possible, because they've been programmed to believe, to not believe. But it's not even about, so we've talked about belief and how I know belief, but it's about knowing. And if Kristen knows that his capacity is far greater than what he's thinking now, he's limiting himself, but she says, I see more in you. That energy exchange is pure. And it's maybe not even the verbiage, but it's just her energy, how she's holding herself and how she's emanating it from her heart. It's not coming from the brain, it's coming from the body. And
I'm the
this,
brain,
yeah, yeah, and
in the
like
brain
up
tank.
above your neckline is the mind, conscious mind that can confabulate every darn thing in the world. But below the neckline, it's unconscious mind. It does not tell you a lie. It tells you what's up by sensation. So the ability to help people to understand that it doesn't matter what diagnosis whatever name it was given, those are just names, because somebody had to make up a name to make a syndrome or a disease process. But your body, the cells of your body are the same. And the reason why we got into the mix that we got into is because it starts with inflammation and it begins up here too. This is part of the process. And so if you can change your mindset to believe, oh, take believing into knowing that my cells can actually heal by the way that I think. If I think loving thoughts, I think compassion and gratitude in my life, which are the highest forms of vibration that help with healing, then if you do it long enough, I guarantee you something's going to shift. It always does. It never doesn't. And you'll be more accepting of that. And if you do that, then the body's healing. So
Mhm.
that's one of the things that we struggle with, that we're up against in centralized medicine, is it's the nocibic philosophy of medicine and rehab. People are labeled as a pathology. Think about that for a second. Oh, I have, or I'm, this, you know, but it doesn't matter what it's named. Cells are cells, and cells all have intelligence. Cells have antennas that are folded proteins. and the antenna goes up and it's listening for the vibration so it can get back its energy and heal. And the antenna will go down if it's not receiving it, and the cell will die or will create inflammatory responses. That's the quantum experience of health and healing that we're not allowed to talk about. 100%. Yeah. Well, thank you, Kristen, for sharing your difficult conversation with your patient and the coming full circle and wrapping it beautifully, and then for us to be a part of that experience, but also energetically putting it out into the world to your patient as well to help harmonize, because that's what we're doing. And that we just continue.
Yeah,
journey.
I look forward to my next visit.
You see, I know I'm excited because
Me
I want to
too.
know.
Me too.
Anyways, well, thank you for another sit, and I'm excited for more.
Yes. Thank you
Thank you.
both.
Yeah, thank you.